And more, you can't just say, we want you to come live here. You have to kind of sell it, right? You have to be the realtor of the state, if you will. So for us, it was really, how do we take these stories of these people who moved here in the last 10 years or so and share that with the world and say, you can have this kind of career here, and you can, visit all these great restaurants, you can go camping, you can go hiking, but you can also just have a really great life.
That's the voice of Lauren Bennett McGinty. She's the executive director at Explore Minnesota, here to share hands-on strategies from the front lines of Midwest place branding. We're talking the commonalities between tourism and talent attraction marketing, plus how storytelling builds economic confidence, boosts local businesses, and positions Minnesota as a great place to visit, live, and work. Welcome back to Inside America's Best Cities. I'm Amanda Ellis of Livability Media. We are your partner for telling community stories like this one, attracting talent, and getting your place in front of the right people. At Livability, we highlight the nation's most vibrant small and mid-sized cities so that relocating talent and business decision makers glean the insights they need. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome, Lauren, to Inside America's Best Cities. I'm super excited to have you kind of chat with us from a tourism and talent attraction standpoint. It's a little bit different angle than we normally get. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So you, of course, lead Explore Minnesota, which runs, state level tourism efforts and also engages in talent attraction. So we're excited to chat with you on kind of, leveraging those cultural pieces, local pride, storytelling, kind of how all that comes together to engage in those things. And one of my favorite things about your background is you formerly ran the Craft Brewers Guild in Minnesota. So that's an interesting I know that plays a role in tourism, but it's an interesting piece of your background for sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, of course, but it was a really great launching point to kind of talk more about small businesses throughout the state and kind of the people behind them and the stories that make our state great. So it's a really core part of my work here, but also all of the other things that we've expanded on in the last couple of years.
Very cool. We're going to be getting into more about that later in the interview, but can you kick us off by sharing kind of some of the high points of Explore Minnesota's work and, how you might summarize some of the state's major offerings for both visitors and for talent?
Right. So Explore Minnesota does a great job of telling the full story of our state. And of course, you had kind of teased the talent component, but it's not just a great place to visit, it's a great place to live. And we know that, and we want to kind of welcome more people to come and experience that for themselves. And one of the great things about Minnesota is that I believe it truly has something for everyone. So we have incredible award-winning arts and culture, food, music, sports. We have all the major professional sports teams and most of the women's professional sports teams, which is amazing as well. We have access to lakes and trails and rivers and forests and kind of wide open spaces, both within our metro area as well as greater Minnesota. And then, of course, like I just said, we have urban experiences, but we also have kind of places where you can go and unplug and see dark skies and every star in the sky. And you can also go to the prairies and see buffalo, or kind of go hiking in caves and caverns and see our national park, Voyageurs, which is pretty much only accessible by boat. So we have all of that, plus the start of the Mississippi River, small towns, as well as we are home to the highest population of Hmong people in the country, as well as Somali people. And so that brings all kinds of wonderful cultural experiences for people, whether it's food or our markets. And we just really are proud of kind of this larger tapestry that Explore Minnesota has. Some of it maybe a little underrated, but definitely something for everyone to experience.
Right. That really is. I think you covered every category. I have only been to St. Paul and a bit of Minneapolis, and it was for a conference a couple of years ago. The Chamber Association actually had their marketing and events conference there, but got a small taste of kind of what you're saying. I mean, I was like, there's so much to do here that I didn't, and I'm based in Tennessee, so we're not right there. But I was like, I did not know there was so much. So it was very fun.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that's great about that is it's good for the people who live here too, right? It's not just something for visitors, it's not just something to see, it's not necessarily all of the big flashy destinations. It's something that everyone here loves and enjoys in their spare time, so it makes it all that more special.
Right, right. Because we do see that, people that live somewhere, they want stuff to do too and engage with just as much as visitors do. And there can definitely be tie ins there. I would love to hear a little bit more about your mission, kind of combining those two things and how leaders decided on that approach, because I feel like it's a little different in a lot of communities. That talent piece really falls more under the EDO, and sort of from an economic development standpoint. And obviously it does like all tie together, but I feel like the way you all are approaching it's a bit different. So how did that happen?
So I think one of the core components of that is how we want people to understand that Minnesota has a really great quality of life. We rank very highly in a lot of different categories. Whether it's like we just found out yesterday that we are the best state to have a road trip in, but we're
Ooh,
also one of
that's
the
fun.
best states for women to grow a career and a great state to raise a family. And so I think for us, it was sort of this natural understanding of what that halo effect is, and that when you go to visit someplace, if you really enjoy it, you're more likely to want to live there or start a business there or go to college there. And for us, in talking to our economic development team, they were like, we do a really great job bringing in the businesses, but we also need to make sure there's talent for those businesses. And we knew kind of in the last couple of years that Minnesota was having a migration problem and that our net migration was down. And so for us, it was how do we kind of take all these messages that get people to come here in the first place and then amplify those to ensure that people understand that not only can you visit, but you can live here. And it just felt like a really natural progression. And now we're seeing more and more DMOs across the country doing this and more chambers kind of leaning in to help with that work. We're also seeing more states kind of being pulled into that. And I think a lot of it is that tourism offices are so good at finding those really unique special pieces of a state or a destination, and they really know how to kind of tell that story. And more you can't just say we want you to come live here, you have to kind of sell it, right? You have to be
Right.
the realtor of the state, if you will. So for us it was really how do we take these stories of these people who moved here in the last 10 years or so and share that with the world and say you can have this kind of career here and you can visit all these great restaurants, you can go camping, you can go hiking, but you can also just have a really great life. And I think it was a really fun way for us to expand on our tourism marketing, but also have some of that talent attraction marketing support tourism in turn, because when you see people living happy lives in a place, you kind of want to go experience that for yourself too.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think you're hitting so many of the high points. I know at Livability, we talk a lot about, yeah, that kind of combination now that people look for. Like, it's not just about work, right? Obviously, that's important, but it's also about where you can have a good life that captures the things you want. And places really have to show they have both of those things, not just one and not just the job aspect. So, I know we covered a good bit on how those, talent and tourism goals dovetail really well. Are there any ways they don't as much, or where you find there does need to be more of a divide in the messaging?
I think generally the biggest difference is sort of long term versus short term, because the decision to move somewhere typically, now I it's different for everyone, but typically it's not just you see a commercial and you decide that that's where you want to go.
Right.
Whereas with tourism, it's a little bit of a more immediate impact. So, we know that putting advertising out in March will drive tourism in May, June, July, August. When you're doing like talent attraction or business attraction marketing, it's a long game. And so for us, where they don't necessarily dovetail as nicely is when you're trying to kind of see that immediate return on results and when you're trying to report on that. And I think that it just means you have to kind of put the message out there more frequently. You have to stick with the same message for a longer period of time. And that journey that people are taking to move or to start that business, it's much longer and it's much deeper than seeing a few really great places to visit, booking your stay. There's a lot more things to consider. That's why we love the idea that they're working in tandem, because our tourism messaging can change through the seasons. And so that's just a nice layer on top of that more consistent messaging around talent attraction and business attraction. So for us, that's a really core component. I think the other piece that maybe where they don't fit as nicely is the things that we can't necessarily control about that talent attraction or business development, right? We're not in charge of the regulations. We're not in charge of increasing housing or making sure that somebody has all the things that they need in a certain community. But we certainly have expanded our outreach to various associations and communities across the state to kind of say, this is something that we're doing. We want to attract more people, and we want to engage with you on how best to do that and where sort of some of those things might come to a head so we can be prepared and you can be prepared. And it's been really fun to kind of get to know those organizations and see what they're doing that maybe we can leverage or how we can support them. And so I think it's sort of long-term versus short-term goals of moving the needle. But, Minnesota has seen for the first time in 6 years an increase in net migration. So we are taking a little bit of credit for that.
Yeah, you
for
should.
having that out there and kind of being out in the field for a couple of years now and having that message be very consistent.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect distinction you made about the, long versus short-term nature of those goals because, where you want to go on a summer road trip isn't necessarily like a life-changing decision if you don't like it or wish you'd done something else. But, uprooting your whole life and moving might be a little more something you need to put some thought into and make sure you get just right. So I read a stat somewhere this week and I can't remember where it was, but it was about just summer vacations and how people are planning around, gas prices and inflation and all of that fun stuff. But that it was a way higher percentage of people who are staying domestic and doing more like, a weekend trip or a road trip than kind of bigger things. So it was just, I don't always get to be as, deep into the tourism side, but I just thought of that and tied it into what you were saying, especially about you being named a great state for road tripping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you kind of have more responsibility to respond to trends when you're doing tourism than necessarily if you're doing relocation and livability, right? So it's this sort of balance between the two, but the message stays very consistent, which makes our job a little bit easier.
Right, right. And kind of to your point too, I feel like there are like trends in talent attraction marketing, but they're not shifting like as quickly, it seems, or as reactionary to some current events as maybe travel marketing would be, like a little bit, but not as much of a short cycle. To your point, do you have a way of tracking that transition of visitors to relocating? I know that's always a little bit of a sticking point with this sort of thing because it's hard to get actual hard numbers on that. And then sometimes even if you did, like a lower number would actually be a big accomplishment, but then you have to frame that for stakeholders. So I know there are challenges with that, but any thoughts?
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. And the good news is that we partner with a lot of different organizations in the state, like our Department of Employment and Economic Development, as well as Greater MSP and the Minnesota Chamber and other, of course, chambers and destinations to kind of understand what data they're collecting and seeing what those trends are. And so for us, some of the things we're tracking is unemployment rates in specific fields, especially if we're trying to advertise to bring some of those workers here. We're tracking that net migration number, tracking overall revenue to the state in different categories. But it is hard. We always have joked about, is there a way to add, a checkbox to the DMV application of like, how did you hear about Minnesota?
There should
So,
be. You have some pull, right? Make that
yeah.
happen.
So, maybe someday, but I think a lot of it is it's very a complex web that is woven, and we're trying to kind of figure that out. But also the nice thing is that we've created a lot of local partnerships with counties or cities across the state to figure out, what kind of efforts are you doing in the economic development space and talent attraction space, and letting them feed into us of what's working and what's not, because they are on the ground. They know how many people are coming to them for the first time saying, I just moved here. What information do I need to know? So it's been something that we're working on and we continue to work on all the time. But I think one of those components is things like Move Buddha, right? Where you get to track the cost of living and you kind of see where people are searching more. And it's also brand perception. We do a lot of studies as we go and trying to kind of increase both in Minnesota perception as well as external to Minnesota perception. And then it's just continuing to see how many people we'll put stuff on our social media, and does the engagement around the livability component increase and get more positive over time? So it's things that might not be exact dollar amounts of this person moved here and this is how much Minnesota made, but more of if we're increasing awareness, perception, and then eventually someone's moving, we can kind of speak to all those other factors that contribute to that decision.
Right. So true. Yeah. Very familiar. And of course, that livability, that's kind of what we do is promote small to mid-sized places, and help, chambers, EDOs, all the folks in a community engaged in that. With that, and looking at the numbers we put around it is kind of exactly like what you're saying. It's hard to say, well, this specifically caused these specific 100 people to make that decision, but you can look at, how you increase the awareness, the impressions, how you're getting in front of people in the ways that they're looking for that info. So very familiar with that push and pull there. One thing I wanted to have you speak more to that you mentioned, what specific career fields are you focused on kind of bringing people in that are engaged in those?
Yeah, we have worked really closely with our Department of Employment and Economic Development to ensure that those kind of high demand jobs are part of our marketing. And we've done, when we were first starting off on this path, we did a lot of research into where those folks were located, highest number of degrees per field. And so Deed has the Drive for Five, and that is manufacturing, high tech manufacturing, education, healthcare, med tech kind of fits in there as well. And then we also have like construction careers, which we didn't actually put into our ad campaigns. That's a much more localized campaign if we were to do it. But these other ones sort of focus more on those med tech, technology, manufacturing, and healthcare, and education positions. So for us, going out to states we've never been in with our tourism marketing, because we could be really selective and really focused on those folks with those specific degrees and backgrounds. So it made the marketing both more challenging, but also more unique. And it gave us an opportunity to be in more places in addition to our tourism marketing, which was really fantastic.
So you kind of looked at where are there high concentrations of people in those fields that we could focus more of our marketing attention?
Exactly. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's really neat for listeners to hear about, because I think that's something like maybe it's not necessarily that you need just anybody to come, but even better if they're engaged in those places where you really need to fit in more workers.
Right. Yeah. And again, finding those, it's not necessarily even a needle in a haystack. You just are searching on different things than normally you would search on for your visitors. So you get yourself in places like Silicon Valley, which Explore Minnesota would never have necessarily advertised in Silicon Valley for visitors, but we know that there's a lot of tech people there, and it can definitely amplify our tech talent here in Minnesota. So it was a great opportunity to try new markets.
Right. We're actually soon going to be coming out with a sort of different kind of data-driven listicle for livability soon, and it is a best cities for engineers, and we're hoping to make it a series of some of the best cities based on data for different career fields. So Chimera, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're sort of experts in the labor market data space, but they helped us pull data on small to medium-sized cities around some criteria we built out around those fields specifically in terms of like, pay versus cost of living, opportunity, like how many job postings there are, what the growth trajectory would look like, to highlight some kind of off the beaten path places for these jobs. So I'm excited about that. And what you were saying kind of reminded me of that in terms of like, there are so many great places you could choose to be that aren't maybe the first place you think of offhand for a certain job, especially in fields like tech and engineering.
Yeah, exactly.
So true. So I know that overall, you guys have seen some challenging headlines over the last year or so kind of in the state. And I wanted to hear some about how that might have shifted some of your messaging, some of your strategy. Specifically, I read about the Come Visit Your Neighbors campaign, which I think was part of that. So I would love to hear a little bit about that campaign and your take.
Yeah. So obviously during Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota, so many communities across the state were really struggling, whether we had people who were in the hospitality and tourism industries who were personally impacted, or folks whose communities were being impacted. It was a really challenging time for so many people. And for us, we really knew that our role was to ensure the safety and well-being of our staff, but also kind of promote the idea of, how can we help the hospitality community? So we weren't incredibly vocal during that time. We were really having meetings and conversations and trying to give resources to people by way of other organizations. We wanted to make sure that we were really thoughtful in how we communicated out during that time, and certainly made some adjustments to our marketing and had conversations with destinations across the state to kind of walk through, what different communications could look like during that time and make sure that whatever they did was right for their community. But the campaign was really born out of the idea that we knew that we were going to need to shift the narrative about Minnesota, because whatever you saw in the headlines was just that. It was headline news. And it really doesn't matter what side of the aisle your neighbor is on. If they are stuck in a snowbank, you will shovel them out. You will make sure that if your neighbor needs groceries, you will help them get them. I think it's just this level of care that we have here for one another, this level of civic engagement and pride that we have, that we wanted to shine through. And it was about the people of Minnesota and to tell that story versus us trying to make a campaign that was solely about just come visit us. It was come visit your neighbors, because we are your neighbors. We are people who care about each other. And if you care about, the person sitting next to you, we are the place for you, but we also need you right now. And so it just was our love letter to the state of Minnesota and to the rest of the world to say, we love each other here, and we hope that you all find ways to support us through this difficult time, but come see what that looks like and come feel that for yourselves.
I love that. And it's so true. Like, a place is not just reduced to whatever current events thing is happening there. Like, it's just not that simple. So I love that captured that. It reminded me of some fun stuff I've seen online since the World Cup's been going on, about a lot of people visiting the US for the first time. And like, maybe we're not having our like most flattering moment on the global stage right now, but that a lot of people are like, it's so beautiful here. And like them just, going to Taco Bell or Waffle House and getting their free refills or whatever and being like, this is amazing. But it's like very heartwarming. So that's what I thought of when you're telling that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting. I mean, even the story of like the Scottish folks in Boston, right, running out of beer. But I feel like it is this embracing of, around the world, I think everybody wants to feel like home when they travel, which is such a strange way of putting that. But it is, you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel safe while you're experiencing something new. And so the fact that it's on the world stage and people are trying all these new things, and they're like, well, we just love it. Everyone's been so nice and everyone's really welcoming.
We went to Buc-ee's and it's just as great as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
So funny. Yes, it was very heartwarming. So we scooped this slightly at the beginning, but of course, before you came into this role, you led the Craft Brewers Guild in the state. What's some of what you brought from that experience into this role, or how do you feel like it uniquely positioned you for it?
Yeah, coming into that role, I have always been such a huge craft beer nerd. Like, I brewed, I worked prior to that for some scientific organizations focused on beer. So I was just kind of really into that culture at the time. And I think coming into that role and then taking that into this role, it's all about community in a way that I don't know if a lot of people understand. You have people all over the country in small towns that are, maybe they're from there originally, or they decide to move there with their family and start a life there. And I think one of the coolest parts about the craft beer community is it can be such a bright spot on a main street, and it can drive development across that town in a way that not a lot of other businesses can, because it's inviting the community into that space, right? And it's expanding the experience for visitors, but also for locals. And you're just creating a hub of energy and joy. They are really at their core here to just help improve and grow, and want to kind of put in the time and energy. And folks in craft beer do not make a lot of money. They're not super wealthy. They're just there because they love what they do. And I think that is what I really pulled through to this position as well, where I got to see on a larger scale that there are businesses everywhere that are doing that they are invested in their community. I feel so privileged every day to be among all these incredible Minnesotans doing such cool things that I get to talk about, right? Like, I get to have all these stories in my back pocket of people who are just making Minnesota one of the best places to live.
Right. That's so fun. It is a fun thing about sort of being part of this work. Yeah, getting to hear about those types of things. I know our last interview that we just released, you were talking about small businesses and, how they're really the backbone of a place. And it was about, I don't know if you had heard of this or had one in your community, but the Painted Tree was like a national chain of kind of a craft warehouse, I guess, where, vendors could buy in and do that. And they all had a sudden bankruptcy recently. And a lot of people just got caught up in a really bad situation. And it was about the local chamber in one of those communities, just helping all those businesses. They did like a free to them, like 2 or 3 day marketplace just to support, and just reminded me of what you were saying about just like those people really pouring themselves into something, and as much as we can help them or be part of it, that's really neat. Um, Another thing I wanted to have you speak to. So, in this type of talent attraction, tourism, marketing, sometimes it can start to feel a little bit like a lot of places are promoting or talking about some of the same stuff. And I would love to hear your take on that in terms of, how to find what really makes you unique, or, handle the idea that a lot of places do share a lot of the same similarities. And I think especially as we've all been engaging more with AI tools and thinking about how that's going to impact our marketing, a big part of that is like you do want to tease out those unique bits, because if everyone is using those tools to like spit out messaging they're working from, everything's gonna like kind of start sounding the same. So I'd just love to get you to speak to all of that a little bit about what uniqueness really looks like.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing to differentiate yourself from folks who have the same kind of qualities as you. Um, but I think ultimately one of the things that we do that I think sort of helps differentiate is really that first person point of view marketing that we've been doing. I think it's really hard to beat. There's a reason why influencers do so well, right? Because they're experiencing something, they're telling everybody, they're being honest, maybe, about what that
Right.
experience is. And so we try to get other people to tell the story for us rather than us having to constantly be the ones driving. And I think hopefully that eliminates some of that AI slop that we're talking about. But having those folks come and having the first person point of view on our marketing has really proven to be a fantastic way to kind of have that influence over the narrative and have people just really demonstrate, what makes Minnesota great without us having to say, and we have the Mall of America and we have this national park, right? Like
The Mall of America is pretty great, but yes.
the Mall of America is absolutely great. Love Mall of America. I live very close by and I've been there way too often. But yeah, so I think having that first person point of view has been really good for us, and it helps differentiate with our competitors for sure.
Right. And it sounds like just diving a little bit deeper even than you initially do in terms of specificity. Like once you think you've been specific, try to be even more specific.
Right, exactly. Like, I think one of the, you look at photos of different things in Wisconsin and Michigan, and, I have family in both, and I've spent a lot of time there growing up. And I know that on the outset, some of it can look similar, but at the same time, there's a lot of really great opportunities in both of them that we don't have here, and that we have that they don't have. And so the more specific you can get, the more you can kind of show people experiencing those things. I think the easier time you have in that sort of heavy competition that we all face.
Yeah. It's really insightful. Yeah, I like that. Well, I've got one more kind of on topic question, and then we'll move into a closer fun question. So, lastly, it looks like film is another area of focus that you're looking at more. I'd love to have you share a little bit more about that and why you're pursuing that more.
Yeah, so we have been trying to kind of get more engaged with film in the last several years, and we were presented with an opportunity that was kind of brought forward by the film community a few years ago to bring the film office to the state rather than have it be a separate organization. And we really embraced it. We love the idea that film can act as a tourism driver, but also it's a way to kind of grow jobs in the state. It's a way to demonstrate, extraordinary economic impact in like just a very short amount of time. I mean, when we had Love is Blind here, they weren't here for very long, but they spent millions of dollars. And
Right.
I think that that's a really interesting component of sort of economic development that not a lot of people think about. But also, I personally am a huge film buff. So when this opportunity came up, I was like, absolutely, it ties into tourism, no problem. I am somebody who literally, I was in Paris, I was on the steps of John Wick when, and like, I love the Mighty Ducks. I grew up watching it and know where all those spots are in our state. And so I think for people who are really into film and they want to kind of see it and live it and experience, where their favorite actors were, that's a great opportunity for tourism. So it is a very full circle experience.
You're right. It can really have an impact, a serious impact, even though we're kind of, it's funny and a light way to look at it, but it can definitely be part of getting your place kind of on the radar for folks.
Absolutely.
So, well, our fun question, and this will probably be a hard one for you because you're so knowledgeable about all the things, Minnesota and things to do. But if someone were visiting the state for the first time, what is one bucket list item or like off the beaten path thing that you would say they should know about if you had to pick like one or two?
That's such a tough question. I think for people who don't have access to a giant lake like we do, I think the North Shore is always such a go-to spot. There's so many great things to experience on the shore of Lake Superior, and it is really like an ocean. But I would say go out to as many places as possible. We have a lot of really fun, kind of quirky places like in Luverne. They have more nutcrackers than they have citizens in that community. And
Wait,
they are.
Do you mean nutcrackers like the nutcracker, like painted ones that are?
Yes, I absolutely
little
do mean
people?
that. Yes.
Okay.
It was a collection donated by a resident, and they have a museum, and they actually just erected a 65-foot nutcracker statue that apparently can actually crack nuts. I have not confirmed that just yet, but we have like a lot of really fun.
Back.
I know. We have a lot of really fun, unique things like that. But then I think if you're in the Twin Cities, one of the coolest parts is access to nature within the city itself. So you can be on the Mississippi River in downtown St. Paul or Minneapolis. You can go to Stillwater, which is like a really small town that is on a river there as well, just kind of on the border of Wisconsin. Minnehaha Falls, a giant waterfall in the middle of a park in the middle of the city. So we have just tons and tons to offer. And then, of course, the Mall of America. I think everybody wants to do that. We have a lot of international tourists who come with an empty suitcase so that they can bring home a full one. So
very important.
Yes, exactly. So there's just so much, but I think one of the coolest parts is our connection to nature. So no matter what you do, just like get out there on a trail, go biking, go hiking, and you can do it all in the city or you can get really far out there. So that's kind of my big suggestion.
All right. Got a good little list going there. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I think you really brought a different perspective, as we talked about at the beginning, about how to tie talent marketing to tourism, and really appreciate you coming on to share that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been super fun to talk about all of it.
Thanks for listening to the Livability Podcast, where we take you inside America's best cities. At Livability, we highlight the unsung awesomeness of small and mid-sized cities across the country. We also partner with communities to reach their target companies and potential residents through digital content and print magazine programs. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and review this show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also learn more about us at livabilitymedia.com. Have an idea for an upcoming episode? Email me at aellis@livability.com. Until next time, from Livability, I'm Amanda Ellis, sharing the stories of America's most promising places.